We are so fortunate to have Dr. Jerry Sattler joining us today for Meet the Author and to talk about his life, his legacy, and his impact on psychology broadly. I'm going to do a brief introduction. I'm here with my colleague Jean Cash, who is going to ask some of the questions. I'm going to monitor the chat box. So as questions come to you all, feel free to put them into the chat box, and I'm going to interrupt and share some of them as we go along. But Dr. Sattler is a diplomat in clinical psychology through the American Board of Professional Psychology and also a diplomat of the American Board of Professional Neuropsychology. He's professor emeritus and adjunct professor of psychology at San Diego State. He received a number of different awards: the Senior Scientist Award from the Division of School Psych, honorary Doctor of Sciences degree from Central Missouri State University, the Gold Medal Award for Life Achievement in the Application of Psychology from the American Psychological Foundation, distinguished contributions to psychology from San Diego Psychological Association, and the list goes on. His most recent award, though, was through ABIP for distinguished service to the profession, and that was just last year. He has been instrumental in training every psychologist that is living and no longer living. All of his books have been integral to our training, our practice, and I have every single one of them on my shelf. I didn't study every single one of them, but I collected every single one of them. And has just been, like the support for faculty, for students. They are the books that just keep on giving throughout our careers. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on introductions. I really want to give everybody the opportunity to get to know Jerry. So I'm going to let Jean start with the first question, and then you all feel free to put questions in the chat box, and then we will bring them forward.
Thanks, Sarah. Dr. Sattler, you have had an amazing career, but please tell us a bit about your most recent publication.
Yes. First, I'd like to thank Nova Southeastern and Sarah and Jean for incredible support over the 20, 30-year period at least in supporting my books and inviting me here today. It's really an honor to think that at the age of 93, I'm still able to communicate and still have some of my short and long-term memory functioning at some level. So you'll have to excuse lapses in my presentation. But it really is an honor to be asked to speak about my career, my views of assessment. I will try to keep my political views out of the discussion, but politics does affect everything we do, and especially in the world of education and funding and training and mental health needs, etc. So Jean asked about my most recent publication. Well, in order to tell you about the most recent one, I think it may help to see the progression of 50-year publication track. So instead of telling you about assessment of children, 7th edition, I will tell you about assessment of children and how it got to be where it is. I grew up as a young Jewish-like child in a conservative Jewish family. I went to Hebrew school. I had my bar mitzvah. I played stickball and handball. I learned 2 musical instruments, clarinet and saxophone, played in the band, the marching band, the symphonic band. I had my own dance band. I fell in love with jazz during my adolescent years and Broadway theater. And I was an active participant in attending Broadway musicals and City College musicals and drama, etc. I I was very fortunate in entering a very young graduate program at the University of Kansas. They hired people like Fritz Heider, one of the most eminent social psychologists in our field. They also hired Martin Shearer, who worked with Kurt Goldstein on the first block design neuropsychological test. And they hired Roger Barker, who was very influential in studying children's normal habitats, literally following children around Oskaloosa, Kansas. And at City College, we had, again, an eminent scholar, Gardner Murphy, who was our chair and ran the department. So my early training was in neuropsych and social psych. And the only tools we had for assessment were books by Roy Schaefer and Rappaport, Gill, and Schaefer.
My gosh.
These were the handbooks of assessment. And I pored over these books throughout my graduate student days to try to find some meaning in what the Wechsler and Binet were telling us. And then I began to teach at a small college in Western Kansas, Fort Hays, Kansas State University now. And I was assigned to teach assessment. And we had one-way vision rooms, and I would stay outside the room and watch the student administer the test and take notes, and take notes, and take notes. And then I had to prepare lectures, and I said, what am I going to say? Where's the book I can use? Well, there really was no book. And I didn't know how to write a book in the early 60s. We had great books by Kronbach and Anastasi, two of our leading psychometrists, but they weren't clinical or school. And school psychology in the 60s to until IDA came out in 1974 was not a very popular profession. But the creation of IDA opened up the need for assessment texts, and my text was available. And that was another thing about my life. I worked almost 10 years without really having a contract. No publisher offered me a contract and said, yes, the field of psychology needs an assessment book. They said, no, the field of psychology doesn't need an assessment book. And I said, yes, it does. And they said, no, it doesn't. Finally, I found a gentleman named Baxter Venable. He was a rep for W.B. Saunders out of Philadelphia. And he says, I think there is a book. He had two editors read my proposal. And one said, if you want to be a success, you have to write about learning disability and ADHD. And the other one said, if you want to be a success, you have to include a chapter on cultural factors that affect assessment. And I said, yes, yes, yes. So I spent another 2 years writing these additional chapters, and the book came out in late 73, 1974. And so that was the first assessment book. And it was called Assessment of Intelligence. It was a success. There's a word in Yiddish called chutzpah. And I remember talking to my editor and saying, Baxter, oh, what kinds of sales do we need for a second edition? And he said, maybe 2,000. I said, okay, where are we now? He said, we're getting there. And by the end of the first edition run, we sold over 4,000 copies. And I was a very happy guy starting to work on the second edition. And then I said, I want to include other procedures, visual motor, adaptive behavior, and extend the focus of the book. And so we added several chapters covering adaptive behavior, learning disability, intellectual disability, etc. So where are we now? We're now in 2024. And I think if you would open up the first edition and look at the 7th edition, you would say, Sattler, you haven't moved at all in 50 years. But I think you got to read a little more closely. A lot of things are changing. A lot of things are subtly different. And in the last edition, I said, I'm going to include material that may not be covered by the professor, but I think the student needs the material. And I included 3 new chapters, a current chapter on learning disability, one on intellectual disability, and one on giftedness. And the second printing of the book literally came off the press this month. So we're very pleased that the book has been well received. The competition is very, very strong in the assessment market. Many publishers have psychoeducational texts, clinical texts, omnibus texts, including both cognitive and behavioral, whereas I've tried to separate the two, but some areas are very difficult to separate. Intellectual disability could go in cognitive or behavioral. Adaptive behavior is more likely behavioral than cognitive, etc. So I'm in the age now of 93. I'll be 94 March 1st. And why haven't I burnt out? And I can't tell you why. I can tell you what Nadine Lambert said about 25 years ago before she passed away. She was kind enough to write a letter of recommendation for my American Psych Foundation Award. And she said, Sattler has a knack of being one step ahead of the field. And that was new to me. If you would ask me what I do, I said I try to stay with the field where it is, but I don't anticipate new developments. She said, yes, you do. I said, well, thank you. And so here I am, not burned out. And I think the reason I haven't burned out is because I'm not writing the same book. At any decade of my life, I'm always approaching new topics. And the decade right now, I'm working on chapters on neuropsychology and aging and cognitive ability, and dementia. And these chapters should be ready, hopefully in press sometime this spring 2025. So I think my reason for being who I am today is because I'm always investigating, trying to gather material of related topics that expand our assessment focus. So I have two goals. One, to gather systematically the literature about assessment topics, and 2, to provide as well as I can, and with my editor's help and the help of readers, an introduction for students. The books have always been written for students in mind. And when Kaufman once said, Sattler is sneaky. He writes books that students won't sell back to the bookstore. I said, Alan, I'm not sneaky. I write the books that I think that students need now. And if they keep it, that is incredible. That's, cream on the cake or extra strawberries, but that's not the purpose. The purpose is to provide a contemporary, useful introduction and synthesis of the psychological literature concerning assessment. And another colleague, Tom Oakland, wrote me a little note when my first book was published. And he said, Jerry, you wrote the book that I wanted to write. And unfortunately, Tom had an early death due to some disastrous events that happened in his life. And I did meet David Wexler when I finished my first book. And David said, that's a nice job. I said, thank you. That was the extent of our conversation in 1974, 75. So the new book includes every major standardized individually administered intelligence test, plus the application of cognitive assessment to intellectual disability, giftedness, and learning disability, plus a resource guide preparing students to testify as an expert witness, to get a background on IDEA, to review statistical concepts that are needed for understanding how tests are generated and used. And so that's it. About the 7th edition is a really continuation of a dream and a hope and an expectation and a refusal to admit defeat. I don't know. I think when I look back at my family, my father used to say, we'll see. And when he said, we'll see, I knew it's going to be a yes
Oh,
eventually. And that's what I did with my book, or Dream, my book Dream in 1959. How do I write this book? What is it going to contain? And how is it going to help me as a professor teach Introduction to Cognitive Assessment?
very cool. Amazing. We have a question from the audience. They've asked, you've had a career that spans such pivotal moments in school psychology. My question is, what are the improvements that we still need to make in special education assessment? And how can school psychologists and trainees advocate for those changes?
I think we have two jobs, obviously, as professionals. One is to provide the best assessment we can of the individual's condition. But unfortunately, we work in a vacuum. We don't work with the family. We don't work with the school system directly. And we don't do the follow-up treatment and tutorials and whatever else the child needs to overcome his or her present disability. And if we can sort of skip ahead to what we may cover later, I think that AI is going to revolutionize the practice of psychology and a lot of other things as well. My work, for example, has quotes directly from AI. It's just brilliant. I mean, my tongue is hanging out. I said, I have to work 3-4 hours to get a paragraph like this, and it comes in 2 seconds, a great paragraph describing visual spatial versus fluid intelligence. I said, they're really pretty close in my mind. And AI gets to the jugular immediately. So I believe if we were doing this 10 years from now, nearly all the assessments will be computerized. Pearson is heading more and more in that direction. Riverside with Woodcock Johnson is going, I think, all out with computerized administration and scoring. And I think our role will be to interpret the findings, to work with the children, teachers, family, parents, etc. So I think the advances in special education will come through medical research, through artificial intelligence guiding our assessment and our therapeutic procedures. And obviously, the drugs that are being manufactured to treat ADHD and maybe autism. And obviously, we're looking for the cure for Alzheimer's, or at least something to help with the adversity connected with dementia and brain changes. So I look at special education as a continuing evolving of better assessment tools, better ways to communicate with teachers, better ways to find remediation solutions. So I don't think there's one answer. I think we have to proceed on multiple fronts, but always considering, and this is very, very hard, when we assess a child, that child goes back to the same environment that he came from or she came from. And we can't control that environment. So this is where the political comes in. I think where governments provide resources for low SES families from families of different ethnicities, where we can bring up the entire population to some living standard that we're proud of, I think we'll see changes. But until that happens, we're going to have problems with domestic violence, problems with sexual abuse, problems with nutrition, problems with air quality, etc. And we can't control the air quality and climate change. But as political beings, we have to be aware of that these macro forces, these global aspects of our life impinge upon our daily activities as professionals. Okay, next question.
Okay. You have answered the first 4.5 questions.
That's good, Gene.
Ask you, and that's an indication of how far ahead you are of the times, Jerry. Anyway, what challenges have you faced in being such a prolific writer and writing so many books, and how did you overcome them?
In order to write a textbook, you have to have peace, calm personality, and you have to be able to focus on whatever it is you're doing. And as I look back over my personal career and life, I've had those to a large extent. The 2 divorces that I've experienced have been hard, especially the first one. That took a toll, significant toll. Generally, I've been relatively healthy. And I didn't realize when I was doing some of the Kennedy training programs back in the 60s, walking up and down steps, and then jogging, and then getting engaged in sports like racquetball and handball as a middle-aged guy, that these would help me when I was 70 and 80 and 90. So I think one of the challenges has been staying healthy and not realizing that I was doing things that would allow me to function as a senior. So I wouldn't say it was a challenge trying to be focused and having an environment that allowed me to be relatively calm. Um, but that has helped. Some of the newer research shows that one of the variables that predicts cognitive efficiency as a senior is conscientiousness. And for some reason, I seem to have that as part of my DNA. The biggest challenge as a professional was getting someone in the publishing field to say there is a need for an assessment text. That was the biggest challenge. And unfortunately, even after I had success, I had another publisher where we had a legal disagreement, and that was another challenge. How do I get the rights to my book back? Once you sign a contract with a book publisher, it's very difficult, not impossible, but very difficult to get that contract back. And that took 4 years of litigation in the 60s. But I kept working on a new edition throughout this period, but the stress was very, very high. The other challenge has been, what do I do with all these competitors that are coming out? And my simple answer is focus ahead, focus on the research, focus on what you believe students need to be successful practitioners, psychologists. And that's what I did. I didn't study Flanagan. I didn't study Kaufman. I didn't study Dombosky, the other textbook authors. I said, I wish them success. I will do my thing and let my professional colleagues decide which way they want to go in their assessment class. So those were some of the challenges. Another challenge, Gene, was literally carrying tomes of psych abstracts to the psychology department office and getting them photocopied and then cut and pasted and piles of paper. And if you would have seen my manuscript around 1970, before computers were coming in, I would have 8 strips of paper on 1 page with staples and tape, adhesive tape, with each little change. It was a nightmare working with a manual typewriter and opaquing out all the mistakes and retyping. And so those were minor issues, but they were issues. You know, every one is an issue. When WordPerfect came out, I became a student again. I said, I'm going to learn word processing. And so I went to night school to learn WordPerfect. And then I was able to use WordPerfect to create tables. I was so proud of myself on different fonts, and I was learning about typesetting. And then all of a sudden, Word comes out with all this package of programs, and I said, I don't think this is a good for WordPerfect. And sure enough, within the next 5 years, WordPerfect passed, and Word took over, and I still miss the reveal codes and the things that I enjoyed, but that was another challenge, how to adapt to the computer revolution. And now email and psych info are part of my DNA. I don't think I can exist today if I didn't have my input from some kind of a web source. So I do all my references through Psych-Lit searches, Google searches, Microsoft searches. So it's a new world, and I really love it. I can I can do much more now with the computer revolution and the web than I could do 20, 30 years ago. Yeah. Next.
So we have a graduate student who said, I'd love to hear how Dr. Sattler gained expertise across the many disciplines within psychology, like school, clinical, neuro, forensic, etc., and would appreciate any advice for us to continue expanding our own knowledge and training.
Thank you. The best advice I can give there is learn about each discipline as you arrive at it. So when you're reading about Freud, become a Freudian. What about Freud speaks to you? Why did he develop these theories? What does the ego, id, and superego mean? Are they just theoretical concepts? Do they have some practical implications for our understanding of human behavior? So when you become when you read about behaviorism, become a behaviorist. When you read about Gestalt psychology, become a Gestaltist. When you read Sattler, become a Sattlerian. When you read Kaufman, become a Kaufmanian. Whatever it is, learn as much as you can about the area that you're studying. You just don't know when some concept like standard deviation or factor analysis will come in handy when you're reading a test manual 10 years in the future. So the best way to prepare for the future is to enhance your learning of the disciplines that your professors are telling you about. If possible, if there's a recommended reading, try to look at the reading. Why was it recommended? How does it fit in with the other things that I'm studying? And for my own development, I'm just interested in a lot of different things. I've always been interested in law and psychology. I'm interested in, as I said, neuropsychology because my professors instilled in me early in my career interest in aphasia and agnosia and apraxia. And that interest has stayed with me throughout my life. And it's the same interest in jazz and theater and reading that has not left me. I've carried those interests with me for 60, 70, 80 years of my adult life. So I think the clue is follow your interests, follow the themes that are being brought up in your class, in your textbooks, in your web searches, etc. And I think it's just a passion for knowledge, a passion for learning about the things that affect the profession of psychology. And this is where you need to understand that you may not see the reason for studying neuropsychology when you're doing a Wechsler or a Peabody or whatever particular test you're administering. But there may come a day where that interest will come in handy. You just don't know. I'm a big proponent of the relatively new thinking in neuropsychology about cognitive reserve and brain reserve. We don't realize it, but the time to think about Alzheimer's is when you're 30, not when you're 70. That is, think of it as a bank. At 30, you put in X amount of money. Well, that in what I'm talking about means eating well, sleeping well, socializing well, stimulating your brain well, and doing the things that will pay off later on. And the more money you put in every year, every decade, or the more brain stimulation you give yourself, you can bank on that when you're 70, 80, and 90. And for me personally, that's what I'm doing. Because of various medical issues, I have not been able to do my polkas and waltzes, which I was doing until about 4 or 5 years ago. I was very active in the ballroom dance scene in San Diego. I had great partners. But because of these medical issues, I've had to cut completely my exercise regime. And then I read a headline today: if you're taking more than 5 medicines as a senior, be careful. Well, don't look at the medicines I'm taking. I'm taking more than 5. So I think I've used 90% of my reserve. And what you're hearing today is about 10%. But that's really, I think, an incredible concept to think about. Brain reserve and cognitive reserve. Just do a Chat GPT or Google search for those two concepts, and within literally 1 minute, you will find an essay, maybe 1 or 2, 3, or 4 paragraphs that will give you the essence of these areas that I consider critical for normal growth and development.
Thank you.
10% of your reserves, Jerry, is still amazing.
Okay, gee, thank you.
Who have been your influences, mentors, and or muses, and what lessons did you learn from them?
We're going to hear secrets.
The question relates to, again, a challenge that I had when I started out as a young assistant professor in 1959. I had just completed a doctoral dissertation on embarrassment. And I had read everything I could on embarrassment, shyness, shame, and interviewed adolescents, adults, schizophrenics, to hear their stories about what they know about embarrassment in their own life. And I try to collate it and present some organized, unified essay on the field of embarrassment. And I was working on an embarrassment scale, etc. And when I was an exchange professor at Cork University in Ireland, somebody said to me, this is in 1990 now, and the monograph on embarrassment came out somewhere, I think, around 1970. No, earlier, must have been 1965. She said, are you the Sattler who wrote that monograph on embarrassment? I said, yes. She said, what happened to you? It dried up. You know, we didn't see any more productivity. And that was really hard to do. I had to give up all my ideas on elaborating embarrassment and how to assess it and what it might mean, you know, clinically, etc., for testing, you know, for the practical real life world of what kind of errors do students make when they administer the test, and what kind of scoring errors and what kind of report writing problems do they have. So this was my focus now. I was focused on the practical world of assessment, and I couldn't also keep my interest in embarrassment and shame and shyness. And Zimbardo came in, and he stepped in, and he wrote a lot of stuff in this area in later years. So who are my muses? Who are my heroes? My first hero was Fritz Heider. He was an elegant gentleman who gave very clear lectures. He supervised my master's thesis. He was a co-supervisor of my doctoral dissertation. I read his book on the psychology of interpersonal relations. And again, here's an anecdote to show you how much I revere him. I was in an oral exam for my prelims at the doctoral level, and one of the professors came in late, and he said, Jerry, on your writtens, there was a question about blah, blah, blah. Did you elaborate on your answer in this session today? And I said, and then Fritz Heider would say, yes, you did. You don't have to say anything else. I almost jumped up and hugged him. He was my savior, not only at that one little minute, but throughout the 5 years at University of Kansas. So I was very lucky. I was in a heavy Gestalt environment. It was phenomenology and Gestalt, and Skinner was the bad boy. He was our bad boy. You can read Skinner, but don't become a Skinnerian. Become a holistic phenomenologist and understand the entire situation and not particularly reinforcing stimuli, etc. So Fritz Heider was one of my heroes. Another gentleman was John Chatlos. He was the director of research at the VA hospital in Topeka, Kansas, and an expert in phenomenological theory. And he had us reading some of Jean-Paul Sartre and a little bit of Heidegger. And he would talk about Husserl and Heidegger and Sartre and de Beauvoir, and how all these writers affected his thinking and understanding of pathology. So those are my two heroes in graduate school, and they have stayed with me. And I'm honored to say that the University of Kansas Psychology Department dedicated a seminar room to Fritz Heider, John Chatlos, and Jerome M. Sattler. And I have the plaque on my door here in San Diego, and there's one in Lawrence, Kansas. So these are my two heroes, and they affected the way I do research. They affected the way I think about psychology, and affected the way I think about the world. Rappaport, Gill, and Schaefer, I must give them credit for doing the seminal work in the 1940s and 50s on the beginning of assessment. And my real hero, for at least the assessment part, is Alfred Binet. Every time I look at those 30 items that came out in 1905, I was just amazed. We had great thinkers in the 1800s, Galton and Cattell and Wundt, and all these people were trying to tell us about human psychology, but this unsung medical doctor in Paris came up with vocabulary and similarities and digit span and visual motor copying. I don't know how he did it. I don't know how he did it. Nobody else was working in this more global assessment area, and he came up with the 1905 scale, and then it was taken over at Stanford, and Merrill worked on the Binet, and a new epoch started at the turn of the century. So that's another one of my heroes, Alfred Binet. Yeah. During the past 60 years of being a professional, I don't know if there's any one particular person that stands out in terms of influencing me. I think that my roots were established uh, right out of graduate school, and that's what I kept doing, following that pathway. Yes.
Thank you so much. We have a question from the chat box, and it says, what do you think are the potential benefits to students, if any, of music instruction or music exposure in grade school?
What kind of exposure? Excuse me.
Music instruction, and exposure to music. I'm sure they were responding to your description of your early childhood. And
Unfortunately, I cannot give a professional answer, meaning I don't know. I would hope that it stimulates children and enlarges their capacity to think and reason, but I really don't know. I don't know if music lessons and exposure to music during infancy or early childhood, I haven't seen any research that's definitive. It may be out there, but I don't know it.
okay, that's fair. We'll go back to our questions.
Okay. Jerry, if somebody asked you for your advice because they were looking to follow your career path or a similar one, what would you say to them?
Don't.
Why?
You have to be prepared. You have to be prepared and willing to put in the time and energy to focus on the issues that are relevant to your project, whatever your goal is. If your goal is to become the best school or clinical psychologist you can be, you will want to read assessment texts, personality texts, child development texts, um, neuropsych texts, and keep at it. Keep accumulating information about the various tracks, the various focuses that you will need to cover in order to carry out your dreams, to carry out your desires, to meet your goals. You just have to be prepared to put in the time, the energy, and willing to have a tough hide. You have to be willing to accept criticism from your colleagues, from your editors, willing to see why they are criticizing you and how you can make a difference. So it's not easy for me to read an edited manuscript and see all the changes that the editor made and why didn't I see those needs when I was writing, but I accept it. I'm really thankful that somebody's editing my work and making it clearer to the reader. So I would say to you, if you want to follow my pathway, just do what you think is needed to reach your goal. And it's likely going to be, if it's in psychology, the strands that I just mentioned a minute ago. And be willing to write and rewrite until it gets to the point where you can't rewrite anymore and the editor is finished with his or her comments and you've answered them to the best of your ability. And the end is in sight for that particular book or journal article or essay or whatever it is you're working on. Another key, be patient, along with being calm being conscientious, be patient. It takes time. And one day builds on the next day.
Very good. So we only have about 10 minutes left. So there's one question that came up in the chat box that I think is a good one for us to end on. What is your most, what are you, what is the thing that you're most proud of from either your work or personal life? Oh, and it's the same one we had. Sorry.
Yeah.
It was in the chat box and it's the one we had, so it's perfect.
Professionally, I'm very, very proud of my 16 quote children. These are children who appeared in press with hard or soft covers for a 50 plus year period. I think it's wonderful that people are still using Sattler, that my approach seems to be one that appeals to many, many professors. Over 110 or 120 schools are using the cognitive assessment book. I don't know how many are using the behavioral, but both books are very dear to me. I'm very proud of them. Literally, today we got orders for the cognitive book from Australia and Norway, and it's being used in Hong Kong and Denmark and Canadian universities. The first 6 editions were translated into Spanish. So all of that is something that I'm very, very, very proud of. Who knew that a relatively poor, one paycheck away from being homeless child growing up in the Bronx, New York, in the Depression years, would become a textbook writer? I was going to become a clinician. I love children. I want to work in a clinical setting. My first job prospect was in Tacoma, Washington, at a children's hospital. The job fell through, and then Hayes, Kansas wanted a professor to teach assessment and work at a clinic, and I took it, and it launched my career. My family is also another source of pride. My oldest son is a social psychology professor at Washington State University, Bellingham, Washington. My oldest child just retired as a psychiatric social worker from Kaiser in San Diego. My other daughter is a school teacher, and my youngest son is a landscape architect. So I'm really proud of all my children, and for my personal life, I ruminate about my first marriage, why it went wrong, what could have been done to prevent it from becoming a divorced marriage. I think I know a little more now than I knew then. Whether that would have been enough to prevent the divorce, I don't know. Obviously, it depends upon the other party. It takes 2 to tangle, as we say. So my proudest moments as I look at my life are professionally, also getting a job as a teacher. That I'm very proud of being at San Diego State since 1965 and going up through the ranks and becoming a full professor. I'm very proud of the books I've written. And I'm also proud that I was able to become my own publisher. So in 1987, after the litigation that I talked about earlier, I made a vow that I'm going to become my own publisher. And my editor from Saunders, my previous editor, helped me, and I read everything I could. I talked to a lot of people, and the publishing world allows you to self-publish because you can hire your own editor, you can hire your own typesetter, you can hire your own printer, and you can do your own marketing by getting ads out in relevant publications. So now we're thinking of what's going to happen with the Waste 5 and how we're going to let people know. So that's an interesting part of my life, the business end, and I really love looking at artwork and going through literally thousands of pieces of art on Google Images and trying to find the art that I think somebody would enjoy looking at when they have Sattler's book on their desk. That's my goal, to have something that's may or may not be related to the topic, but that is a good piece of artwork, attractive, stimulating, beautiful, something that somebody enjoys. So I've worked very hard in finding the images that go with the book. There's a abstract artist named Vassarelli who has these three-dimensional block patterns. And I was in a La Mesa, California bookstore, and I was looking through an art book, and I said, "That's what I need for my book." And the third edition has a Vassarelli three-dimensional block pattern. I said, "This is incredible art that mirrors the professional area." So that was a stroke of luck. I didn't know about Vassarelli before. So there are a lot of little things that happen in my life on a daily basis that I'm proud of. I'm proud of the fact that one of my colleagues who recently passed away, Al Hillocks, he wrote an incredible book with Marx and Hillocks on systems and theories of psychology. He said, "Jerry, you have the best textbook art."
And jokes.
Al,
Jokes.
I want to say, Al, I hope I don't go down with that epitaph that I have the next textbook of art. That's nice to know, but that's not where really it is. I prefer to say you have a successful text that has trained many psychologists and who are, glad to have your text available in their training program and their professional life. I'm very proud of that. Very proud of the fact that Kaufman said I'm a tricky SOB by creating a work of professional, integrity that people don't want to sell back to the bookstore. I said, that's not where it's at. That's not where it's at.
But I have to tell you, in the chat box, a lot of people are writing that, many still have your books that were published in the early 70s.
Oh, well, that's good to know.
And then many people are saying that they've used your books throughout their graduate school career and throughout their professional school career as a school psychologist, clinical psychologist, and the like. And so I think there's a lot of love in the chat box around, just the impact you've made on all of us.
I appreciate that.
And as a psychologist, I am very proud of you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So it's just about 4, and I know you swore me to 1 hour. So so I didn't want to take advantage.
You can have another minute.
Okay, 1 minute.
I'm very generous.
Well, but it's been such a privilege to have you share a little bit about what's influenced you and the impacts on your life, because you've had such an impact on all of us. So
I appreciate that. I appreciate all your support. I appreciate everybody attending today. I hope you all read the Waste 5 when it comes out and give me feedback about what you liked about it, what you don't like about it, what needs to be done in the future. So I welcome feedback about any of my publications, feedback about today's informal reality testing
And
webinar.
all the teaching resources because faculty love them. So you save us hours and hours and hours of time.
Yes.
So
Thank
thank you
you.
so much.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you all for attending.
Okay.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you
Bye,
again.
everyone.
Bye, Jean. Bye, Sarah.
Bye,
Bye,
Jerry. Take
Jerry.
care.
Take care.
Thank you again.